In this video, I'm going to talk about how to use generative AI and what I expect in my class. Just a quick note, different people have different opinions on using generative AI, different theories, and also just different content areas. So it's important to ask your professors whether or not you can use AI and how you can use AI. There might be in a content area different from mine that AI is not going to help you learn as much. And so make sure you check. So this is specific to my class, but I hope it's informative and useful for other things you do in life. So it's important to have a basic background in what these tools are before you use them. And so in this video, I'm going to give you that background, talk about how you have to think differently when you use these tools, and then give you some guidelines for what I expect in my class. So here we go. So what is generative AI? So AI itself is not new. When you do voice assistants, for example, Siri, it recognizes your voice and what you said. That is using AI. AI is just some human characteristics that a technology can take on. Generative AI is also not that new, but in 2022, late 2022, a company called OpenAI released a large language model, a generative AI tool, into the public. And so that's when it started getting a lot of attention because we realized what people had been working on for a long time, what they could do. And since then, it's gone crazy. So generative AI is generative. It's different than your common technologies. Like, for example, if I put an equation in a calculator, I expect it's going to give me the same thing back every single time. Or if I misspell a word on a Google Doc, I expect that it's going to correct it in the same way every time, given the context. Generative AI is different. It generates things based on the patterns it was trained on, and there's also some randomness built into it. So you have to know it's always a little bit different. It's multimodal. We can go back from text to image and sound and video, and it makes it very powerful. It's also dialogic and conversational. That means that instead of just one way, it's having a conversation with you, kind of like Siri or other voice assistants like Alexa, but it's much more complex than that. And so it can really feel like a real human. It's important to remember that it's not, okay? So quick key terms, generative AI, it's deep learning models that can generate high quality text, images, other content based on the data they were trained on. And that's really important to remember. Okay. A large language model is like ChatGPT, and that's basically generative AI that's been fed enough examples to recognize and interpret, although I'm not sure interpret's the right word, but it sees human language and responds to it, or other types of complex data, like you can use images with large language models a lot. So basically what these do is in its training data, it starts recognizing patterns. It starts recognizing what words go together. And so it's kind of like, if we're going to oversimplify it, it's guessing what's the next most likely word given the words before it. So, for example, if I said to you, Mary had a blank, if you grew up in the United States, you would most likely say Little Lamb because that's a very common song, and it would have been in ChatGPT's training data all over the place because it's very US-centric. But if I said something like Josh had we could all get very different answers because that's not a pattern that was commonly seen. However, large language models don't know the difference between a pattern that was there a lot and a pattern that wasn't there as much. And so it will just as confidently make something up to put in that sentence, at least the early models. It does not actually have a conception about whether, or an understanding of whether or not it's true. Here's another example. I asked for the most likely words that come after Lincoln was born in, and this is what it gave me. All of these, as far as I know, are true because there was a lot of stuff on Abraham Lincoln in its training data. Now, there might be famous people in other countries that it wouldn't be as good at it because it wasn't in its training data. And that's where we start getting into some of the bias and stuff in these models. If I say what words are commonly associated with Melissa War was born in, unfortunately, I'm not famous enough. None of these are true. It hasn't seen these patterns so much, so it's just going to give what's most likely, which maybe it's just that a lot of people are born in California and New York, and it's US centric, and that's, an English name. Maybe it's just Melissa was really popular in 1985. It doesn't really know. It's just repeating a pattern. So you can think of it like this. For humans, we exist in reality, and we have all our different senses that we use to understand reality and just our experiences every day with people. And those help us form internal representations of what the world is like. We can make judgments on what's probably true and what's not true. And so we take these internal representations and we put them to external. So we write books, or we sing songs, or we take pictures or draw pictures. And a lot of those representations end up on the internet. Now, it's not equal. Some people have more of their own representations on the internet than others. And it's going to include all the biased representations that we have, all the racism, all the other things that we have biases for, that comes into this. The only thing large language models has access to, basically, is these external representations. So that is what it is built on. Whoever has the most representations, whatever biases they're in there, and it does not know from experience or the real world whether or not things are true. So where does it get these external representations? That's the training data. So if you look at this 3% right here, this is all of Wikipedia. So you think of how big Wikipedia is. This was ChatGPT 3, which is the very first model that OpenAI released in November 2022. Common Crawl is basically the internet and books. That's what it was trained on. But it's only certain books, right? Certain kinds that are on the internet. Now that was ChatGPT 3, and this is GPT-4. This is the model that is free right now from OpenAI. And it's also a similar amount of data as other models, like the best models from like Claude, which comes from Anthropic. So by having this much data, it gets better in some ways, right? It gets more responsive because it knows more of the patterns. But it also can be less fair and more biased because it has more patterns. And that's something that I'm kind of finding in some of my research. Okay, one more quick example, and this is not a perfect example, but it's kind of highlighted something for me. So this is my great niece, Nora, and we were hiking in the Bryce Canyon in Utah. And we were down in here somewhere, and we came to a fork in the trail, and I didn't know which way to go. And I asked, so which way are we going? And Nora, very smart girl, said, Melissa, you've got to go right, then left, then right, then left. I read the map. Now, I knew she didn't actually read the map, but I was kind of surprised she was talking about right and left. So I said, Nora knows what right and left are? And her dad says, Nora's a bit like ChatGPT. Now, if you think about that, what does that mean? It means she's putting out words that she's heard together, even though she doesn't really know what they mean. She's heard of going hiking. She's gone hiking a lot. And when she's been hiking, adults around her talk about maps. They talk about right and left. And she's begun to put those things together. But just because she can repeat those words together doesn't mean that they're true. Now, as an adult with world experience, I was pretty sure that as smart as she is, she couldn't read a map. But I did make a small assumption. I assumed she must know right and left. And that was a false assumption on my part. It's really easy to do that. So when we use large language models and it's easier with other AI, but large language models, it's really easy to assume that certain things are correct. And really, it sounds so authoritative. It doesn't sound like a 3-year-old, right? It sounds so authoritative that we might assume everything's right. And it's hard to change our minds and wrap around it. So we have to think differently about it. It requires new ways of thinking and acting. And I'm just going to briefly address these. This is partly for helping people learn that we need to be human directed. We need to have active engagement, collaborate together and have creative discovery. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're generating something. So you're generating words, perhaps. And then you've got to think about those words. And it's great if you can think about it with other people. But you have to keep this step in here. You can't just take this and be done with it. You always have to be reflecting. So the first one is human directed. That means that you don't want a passive interaction where it's just telling you what to do, because it can feel like that sometimes, and we don't want to fall into that trap. So here's an example how I used it to learn with intention. So I was working on Spanish on Duolingo, and I came to this example and I didn't understand it. So I actually just took a screenshot of this. I do that a lot. Even if I'm reading an article, I just take a screenshot and paste it into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever I'm using and ask it to explain for me. And it gave me a pretty nice explanation. Now, I can't 100% assume that's true, but it seemed to line up with the examples I was seeing and learning. And then I wanted to practice it. So I'm intentionally saying, can you test me to see if I understand? And the first time it gave me a quiz, but I didn't really want to take a quiz. I asked it for one question at a time. And that's something you have to do. You have to go back and forth as you learn how these work, how to write better prompts, and how to refine what you want. So then it did this. It gave me the question, and I gave the answer, and it gave me feedback. Now I'm still thinking, does this make sense? Does this align with what I've seen? And it seemed to. And I just kept, whenever I saw this concept, I kept trying to make sure that that was correct. But this was a great way where I was in charge of my learning and I was using it for me, not having it use me. Active engagement. When we use this, we need to make sure we're thinking. So like I wasn't skeptical enough of my niece using the words right and left. I need to be skeptical of everything it tells me. And I capture that, catch myself a lot making assumptions because I'm still learning to think this way. But that's part of the process. Collaborative exploration, it's really good to do it with other people. And in my classes, sometimes we do activities where we're online, but we'll record our own interactions and show each other or review our transcripts to try to catch those places where we're making assumptions. And then just, when you're teaching, to help students understand and recognize that idea of humans thinking and AI thinking and how they work together as well as how they're different. Then the last one is creative discovery. And this is just, basically just try stuff. The way you learn about this is just doing things. So it's kind of like when we first were looking at the internet and you would forget that you could just Google something, and people used to have this thing that's like, let me Google that for you, right? So we start learning what this can do. So you have to try things to see. So the other day, I borrowed this stroller from a friend and I didn't know how to fold it up. And I didn't know if this was going to work, but I thought I'd try it. So I took a picture of it and I said, how do I fold this up? Now, this is a good use because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's okay if it's lying because I'll know that it's lying. But if it works, then that's useful, right? So first of all, it recognized it was a Graco jogging stroller. It says find the release handle. It has a handle in the seat or backrest area, often labeled with a fold icon. Guess what? It was right in the seat area. I pulled it up. I folded it up just like that. So I didn't know that was going to work, but I just tried it. And so, I do that all the time when I'm reading an article, I don't understand something. I'll take a screenshot and I'll just paste it in there and ask it to help me understand something, still using my own mind and reflecting on it. But you just try stuff and it can do amazing things for you. So when you're using it in my classes and really any classes, it's important to be transparent. So I'm telling you can use this, but I'm not telling you can cheat with it. You've got to use these thinking skills. So here's tools in Canvas. There's a page that talks about AI. That's probably where you're watching this video. It has all these links of different tools. There's more tools coming out all the time. And so I don't have them all on here, but this is a start. There's also tools for like literature reviews and such that I don't have on here that I should add. Hopefully in the future I'll add. When you're using it, you are responsible for, is it going to go to my next one? Practicing your thinking skills when using it, being skeptical and reflective, using your human skills with AI. You're ensuring validity of statements, facts, opinions. You're responsible for anything you turn in, even if it was said AI. And then this one, sharing when and how you use it. That's part of the transparency. We're all learning. And honestly, I'm just curious what you've tried for it. So you can see here's some examples of what students in the past have done. They just add a comment. I use Grammarly AI to reword my sentences. Or I used it to help me create a rubric in rewording it. I had it give me 15 discussion questions. I had to rewrite most of them to be more appropriate. So I really appreciated, that feedback so I can see what we're doing and we can decide whether that's appropriate or not. I helped it mold the idea. I wrote rubric. I asked it to generate learning community activities. I adjusted the wording of the prompt, selected one that sounded right, and put everything together. So that's something you have to do a lot. You have to adjust prompts and regenerate and such. But ultimately, we're all learning this together. So this is a great, Adobe Firefly image, generative AI image picture. But I'm excited to use this and I want you to use it. Maybe my camera's, yeah. I want you to use this, but I want you to use it intelligently and transparently. So if you have questions, reach out and we'll just keep exploring together. Thanks for watching.